Just because one of his kidneys was taken, a man brought down an entire illegal organ network. This is the 2002 South Korean film Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. As the opening chapter of the Vengeance trilogy, the film perfectly showcases director Park Chan-wook's master-level storytelling, presenting revenge through a powerful mix of emotional release and deep despair. Compared with Old Boy and Lady Vengeance, this film is more direct in its approach, more intense in tone, and some scenes may cause strong discomfort for sensitive viewers. If possible, it is recommended to watch it with your partner by your side. Without further ado, let us take a look at this classic crime revenge film together today. The story's male lead is named Ryu, a man born with hearing and speech disabilities. Because his parents passed away early in his life, he and his older sister depended on each other to survive. To support his education at a special school, his sister gave up her own studies and began working at a young age to earn money. However, years of exhausting labor caused her to develop a serious kidney condition. She lost her job as a result, and had to undergo frequent medical treatment to manage the pain. With a transplant being the only long-term solution, this placed an even heavier burden on their already struggling household. To save his sister, Ryu decided to offer one of his own kidneys through proper medical channels. But after a series of tests, the doctor informed him that their blood types were incompatible, making the procedure impossible, and that they could only wait for a suitable donor. This process was often extremely long, and the cost was very high. With no other option, Ryu left school and began working in a factory while waiting for news from the hospital. He worked overtime day and night, eventually securing a stable income. But soon after, the factory announced layoffs due to poor business conditions. As a worker with a disability, Ryu became one of the first to be dismissed. Although the factory provided a considerable severance payment, it was still far from enough to cover his sister's medical expenses. Watching his sister's condition worsen made Ryu feel as if he were slowly losing his breath. He had no idea what he should do next. One day, a small advertisement in a hospital restroom offering money in exchange for a kidney gave him a sense of hope. Following the phone number on the ad, Ryu made contact with an illegal group. Soon after, a middleman led him to an abandoned building. After hearing his situation, the woman in charge explained that if Ryu could provide 10 million won along with one kidney, they could locate a matching donor for his sister and arrange the procedure within a week. Ryu agreed to the conditions on the spot. He gathered all his savings, along with the severance pay, and barely managed to collect 10 million won in cash. But when he woke up after the procedure, he found himself alone on the floor, with the building completely empty. Only then did Ryu realize that he had been deceived. He had lost a kidney, and the money meant to save his sister was gone as well. What made the situation even more bitter was that just 1 week later, the hospital delivered unexpected news. They had found a donor compatible with his sister, and after coordination with hospital management, Ryu only needed to pay 10 million won for the transplant, with the procedure itself being covered. This news left Ryu emotionally shattered. With no other option, he turned to his girlfriend Youngmi for help. After learning about his actions, Youngmi lost her temper and forcefully confronted him. But after calming down, the two sat together and began discussing a plan. Youngmi was known for her extreme way of thinking, and her idea reflected that. She encouraged Ryu to take the factory owner's daughter and demand 20 million won in exchange. She believed the owner would pay without hesitation, since the amount was insignificant to someone of his status.
난 되레 정들까 걱정이다. 집에 안 간다고 떼쓸까 봐. 맨날 언니 오빠들이랑 놀기만 하는데 얼마나 신나. 그 지겨운 학교 안 가도 되고.
Ryu was quickly convinced by her reasoning, with Youngmi by his side. It seemed impossible for his life to remain ordinary. The two began observing the area near the factory owner's home. However, the sudden appearance of another man disrupted their plan. That day, the factory owner went on a family outing with his neighbor Park Dong-jin. During the drive, a middle-aged man suddenly blocked their way. He was a former employee of Park Dong-jin who, like Ryu, had worked diligently only to be dismissed. Overcome with anger, the man harmed himself in front of Park Dong-jin to express his frustration. Park Dong-jin rushed forward to stop him and was accidentally injured in the process. Fortunately, the factory owner intervened in time, preventing the situation from escalating further. This incident made Ryu hesitate. He believed that targeting the factory owner's daughter would draw suspicion toward himself, especially after being dismissed. But Yeonmi quickly adjusted the plan. She suggested shifting their focus to Park Dong-jin's daughter instead, since both families were wealthy and this change would help Ryu avoid suspicion.
권총으로 머리 하나를 쏴버렸어.
Soon, Yeonmi lured the girl to Ryu's home under the pretense of playing together. Ryu did not tell his sister the truth, claiming instead that the girl belonged to a friend who was temporarily away. To move the plan forward, Ryu intentionally upset the girl and took a photo. He then exchanged a necklace for the doll in her hands and mailed both items to Park Dong-jin. Only then did Park Dong-jin realize that his daughter had been taken. Following the instructions in the message, he chose not to contact the authorities, withdrew 20 million won in cash, and prepared for the exchange. Meanwhile, the girl was actually living comfortably. Ryu's sister grew very fond of her, and the two spent time together like family. His sister even wrote down her phone number, hoping the girl would visit again in the future. Soon, the agreed exchange time arrived. Park Dong-jin set out alone with the money, while Yeonmi followed him at a distance. According to the text message instructions, Park Dong-jin arrived at the top of a hill in a park. After confirming that no one was nearby, he placed the money down and covered his eyes. Seeing the moment was right, Ryu emerged clumsily from a nearby hut holding ropes and a black plastic bag. In the end, the exchange was completed. After receiving the ransom money, Ryu was filled with joy because he finally had the means to treat his sister. But when he returned home, the little girl handed him a letter. Ryu opened it and was shocked to see that it was his sister's farewell note. He rushed toward the bathroom in panic, but it was already too late. His sister was lying motionless in the bathtub, with no signs of life. It turned out that while Ryu was out making the exchange, his sister had accidentally seen the factory's severance agreement. Only then did she realize that Ryu had already been dismissed from his job. Combined with Ryu's recent unusual behavior and the sudden appearance of the little girl, she had already guessed what Ryu had done. In order to stop her brother from going any further down the wrong path, she made a decisive choice to leave. At that moment, Ryu completely collapsed. That night, he drove through the dark, carrying his sister's body back to the countryside. While the little girl insisted on coming along, Ryu carried his sister to the riverside where they used to play as children, and slowly covered her body with stones. Just then, a simple-minded man appeared from nowhere and kept tossing away the stones Ryu had placed. Left with no choice, Ryu chased him away. Unexpectedly, after leaving, the man returned to Ryu's car. At this moment, the little girl was sleeping peacefully inside the vehicle. The man tried to take her necklace using a tree branch, but accidentally woke her up. Startled, he hurried away from the car. Awakened and frightened, the girl shouted loudly toward Ryu, but when she received no response, she got out of the car and ran toward the opposite riverbank. However, the simple wooden bridge was unstable, and the girl slipped and fell into the water. She struggled desperately and cried out to Ryu for help. But Ryu, who was born deaf and mute, could not hear anything at all. By the time Ryu finished settling his sister's remains and turned around, he finally realized that the girl had fallen into the river. He ran frantically toward the opposite bank, but everything was already too late. Seeing the girl's body drifting in the middle of the river, Ryu stood frozen in panic, afraid to enter the water because he knew how deep it was. At that moment, the simple-minded man appeared again and slowly walked toward the girl's body. He took the necklace from her using his mouth. Only then did Ryu understand that the reason the river once seemed so deep was because he had been too small back then. Soon, the authorities discovered the girl's body. Park Dong-jin could not understand why. After paying the ransom as instructed, his daughter still never returned. He left the scene in a daze and made up his mind to personally seek justice for his daughter. After that, he sold his company and all of his properties, spending a large sum to persuade the head of the investigation team to provide him with information. After receiving the money, the captain acted quickly. Among the girl's belongings, he found a drawing that had been given to her by Ryu's sister. Using the phone number written on it, the investigators soon located the rental apartment where Ryu and his sister had lived. However, The place had long been vacated, and no useful clues were found. The captain then asked Park Dong-jin to recall whether he had recently offended anyone. Looking at the still unhealed cut on his hand, Park Dong-jin immediately thought of the former employee who had harmed himself that day. The two quickly went to the man's home, but when they entered the house, they were shocked to discover that the man had taken drastic measures together with his entire family. Park Dong-jin stared blankly at the tragic scene, never imagining that a single action of his could lead to such consequences. Fortunately, one of the boys still showed faint signs of life, and he and the captain rushed the child to the hospital. When the doctor asked who the child's guardian was, Park Dong-jin answered without hesitation. He hoped that saving this child could ease the guilt in his heart. That evening, he returned to the rental apartment once more to search for clues. When he saw the wallpaper on the wall, something suddenly clicked in his mind. He quickly took out the photo from when his daughter had been taken, and noticed that the background matched the wallpaper pattern exactly. It was clear that this place must have been connected to the people responsible. At that moment, the sound of a radio came from the neighboring room. After listening to the story being told, Park Dong-jin immediately sensed that the main character of the story was very likely the person he was looking for. As it turned out, Ryu, who was deaf and mute, had long had the habit of sharing his experiences through a radio program. After the deaths of his sister and the little girl, he once again sent his story to the station. Through the illustrated booklet provided by the radio host, Park Dong-jin became even more certain that the green-haired man depicted was the one responsible for his daughter's fate. Following the clues in the booklet, he returned to the river where his daughter had fallen into the water. Beneath a pile of stones, he uncovered a badly deteriorated female body. At that very moment, the simple-minded man appeared again, and the necklace around his neck immediately caught Park Dong-jin's attention. Upon closer comparison, it was exactly the same as the one his daughter had worn in the photo. When Park Dong-jin found the captain again, the vehicle information of the suspected individual had already been confirmed. It turned out that although the simple-minded man had limited intelligence, his memory was unusually strong, and he had remembered Ryu's license plate number from that day. By cross-checking this information with the identity of the woman found by the river, Park Dong-jin quickly locked onto Ryu as the true person responsible. Meanwhile, after Ryu moved out of the rental apartment, he and Young-mi were also planning their own act of revenge, targeting the group that had deceived them. Ryu believed that if it had not been for those people, his sister and the little girl would not have lost their lives. He had Young-mi pretend to be a seller, successfully making contact with the group again. After confirming their hiding place, Ryu followed one of the men into the building when he went out. As soon as the man opened the door, Ryu moved quickly and knocked him unconscious. The woman inside froze in shock. Another strong man attempted to fight back, but Ryu struck him in a critical area, and the man soon collapsed. Right in front of the woman, Ryu brought an end to the other two accomplices. The woman who led the group met the same fate. By relying solely on himself, Ryu completed his revenge. However, he had no idea that a separate act of revenge against him had already begun. Following the information provided by the captain, Park Dong-jin found Young-mi's home, restrained her to a chair, and connected her body to an electrical device. No matter how Park Dong-jin questioned her, Young-mi refused to reveal Ryu's whereabouts, and even warned him that a mysterious group stood behind her and would retaliate if anything happened to her. These words immediately angered Park Dong-jin. He decisively increased the power of the device. After several rounds, Young-mi was finally forced to give in. She apologized to Park Dong-jin and explained that they never intended to harm the girl, and that everything had been an accident.
생각해서 해주는 말이야. 정말이에요.
Looking at the joyful photos of his daughter, Park Dong-jin knew she was telling the truth, but he still chose not to spare Young-mi. Because his daughter would never return, he covered Young-mi's head with a blanket and activated the device once more. When Ryu rushed back, Young-mi had already lost all signs of life. At that moment, the elevator was filled with police officers, and Ryu could only quietly hold Young-mi's hand as their final farewell. He knew that this must have been done by the girl's father, Park Dong-jin. Ryu then drove to the area near Park Dong-jin's home and waited, determined to seek revenge for Young-mi. But after waiting the entire night, Park Dong-jin never appeared. In fact, Park Dong-jin was also lying in wait. hidden inside Ryu's residence, waiting for him to return. The two sides waited at each other's locations without realizing it. In the end, Ryu could no longer endure it, left behind 2 bottles, and drove away. When he returned home, he noticed that the lights inside were on. He cautiously approached the window and was shocked to see the person he had been searching for lying on the floor, fast asleep. Ryu quickly pulled out a knife and prepared to take action, but the moment he turned the doorknob, a powerful electric current surged through his body, knocking him to the ground. It turned out that everything had been a trap set in advance by Park Dong-jin. When Ryu woke up again, he had been taken to the river where the girl had fallen into the water. Park Dong-jin knew that his daughter's death had been an accident, but he still could not forgive it.
착한 놈인 거 안다. 그러니까 나 죽이는 거 이해하지?
Ryu could not understand what Park Dong-jin was saying, and could only gesture repeatedly, begging for forgiveness. However, Park Dong-jin had already made up his mind. He entered the water and used a blade to disable Ryu's legs. Ryu immediately lost his balance and struggled helplessly in the water. The river surface churned violently, splashing onto Park Dong-jin's face. He did not dare close his eyes, because he needed to witness the end himself. Before long, Ryu stopped moving completely. Park Dong-jin carried Ryu's body back to the shore. Sitting in his car, he recalled every moment with his daughter, and although he had taken revenge, his heart felt no relief at all. At that moment, the hospital called to inform him that the employee's child, whose condition had been severe, had also passed away. This news severed the final emotional thread holding Park Dong-jin together. He then began dealing with Ryu's body, but just as he was digging a pit, a car suddenly approached. 4 men stepped out of the vehicle and immediately attacked him. In the end, they left behind a written notice pressed against Park Dong-jin's chest. It turned out that Yeon-mi had not been lying, and these men were members of the mysterious group she had mentioned. The group then calmly drove away, staring at the notice on his chest. Park Dong-jin desperately wanted to know what it said, but his vision blurred. In the end, he leaned against the car and lost consciousness. The film ends here. See you next time.